Hello, my name is Przemek and today I'm going to show you how to work with time in Storyline. Specifically, I want to create countdown timers. So imagine that you have a quiz and you want to limit that only to a certain amount of time. This technique can be very handy this way. So there are two ways you can do that, and among many other potentially, but I want to show you only two, and those two are using only built-in solutions within Storyline. I'm not using any custom JavaScript, which sometimes might be an advantage or sometimes it might not, but yeah, it is what it is. So this is the old school. This is the way I was using to count time. So basically it works like this. Let me preview that. You see the animation, and animation is looping every second, and it's adding to a variable, not one, and then it's increasing, so it's incrementing the total value. So this way we see a counter moving by every second. So how it is built, of course, you can take that offsite. You can take that away from the main screen so no one sees that, but it works. Like it will work still outside of the main Canva. So here you can see how it is structured with triggers. So we have one trigger that is adding that one value to our old school counter. So it's this old school variable that is displaying seconds. And I'm limiting to 60 seconds. So imagine I want only 60 seconds here. The other one is that every time the animation on the rectangle finishes, we want to make it hidden. And then straight away, we want to make it normal. And why we want to make it normal? Because it will relaunch the animation. And this way, the trigger at the top, when the entrance animation finishes or completes, it will add one. And that's why it's looping. So you could see that on the preview. It's like blinking. So one important thing is that you also need to set that animation time to duration to be 1 second. This way it should be an equivalent to a real 1 second spent on the slide. So this is how it might work, and it's kind of interesting technique, but it has its downsides. One of the downsides is that if you launch this, and let me refresh it, it's a published storyline to a review. Here you can see that it's working, it's increasing the counter, but what happens when I lose focus from the training? So imagine that I'm here, you ask me something, and I'm going to go to Google to find the answer. So I'll just jump here, and you remember what was the time on the screen? It was 15 seconds when we left. So I'll go here, maybe I'll just browse something, I'll look for some answers, and then if I'm going to return, you would expect that we are like somewhere close to 40 seconds, but if I go back, it still hangs on 15 seconds, which is not ideal because this means that I can cheat, like I can cheat the timer, especially if it's connected to something important, like a time constraint. I can very easily cheat that with just switching to another window, so losing focus on my main screen. It was 30 when we moved away, and now it should be like 50 already because I talk a lot. So if I go back, you can see that it was still 30, which is not great. And here comes the second approach that we can take. So let's go back to Storyline. Let me increase that. So this is a new school. And this new school is using a very nifty variable that was introduced some time ago. And it is a built-in variable which says slide lapse time. And yeah, let's have a look how it works. So first you can see it's measuring a time on the slide from the very beginning, and it measures that in milliseconds. Why it's important? Because 1000 milliseconds equals 1 second. And you can see here a comparison, like a counter that is reflecting what's happening with that variable. You can see 21,000, it was 21 seconds, and so on and so forth. So this is how you can calculate that. But how to do that? How to leverage that variable so we can reflect that in more understandable way. Like you see seconds instead of milliseconds, because normally we don't use milliseconds in the real life, potentially. So we can do that also with 2 triggers, and 1 trigger and 3 variables, which is important. So we're going to have a variable that is displayed here. So this is milliseconds to seconds. So this will be the one where we're going to add that 1 second. So we're going to count, and we're going to increment that to show the counter how it is moving up to, for example, 60 seconds. The other one is that we need to tie it to information when it should happen. So for us, if I move it to the side here, for us, we want this trigger to run every time this super fast going variable, this built-in variable, slide elapsed time. So this is the one you can see, built-in and slide elapsed time, when this variable changes. And it changes very rapidly, which is good for us because it's like it can quickly identify when we have that first second and so on. So then what we want to do, we want to set some conditions like thresholds. We know that 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. So what we can say that it should add 1. So it should indicate that 1 second passed when this counter, this super quickly moving counter of slide elapsed time, when it's going to be greater or equal to, and let me change that for a second, to 1000. So this is our threshold for first second, to detect that first second already passed. So I can even, potentially, I can just do it like that. And if I click OK, you can see what's going to happen. So we are waiting, first second is approaching, and then it goes off, because our criteria here is fixed. So once the slide elapsed time will hit 1000 milliseconds, every single time then, when this variable will change, it will add 1, because this condition will be met. So we don't want that. We want something more dynamic here as a threshold. It needs to increase. So what we can do, we can put a variable, because this will be a dynamic value then, and I've called that divider, and then it's changing. It's going to be changing, and I'm going to show you how. So let's go back to settings for variables. You can see that my initial divider, it's 1000, because I want to detect first second. And then what I'm doing with the second trigger, I'm saying that when our first second is detected, immediately, straight away, bump up that divider to 2000 and then 3000. So to detect next moment when the counter will hit next second. So let me maybe show you that in more details. So have a look. This is a variable for divider. This is our built-in slide elapsed time. And this is our ms to seconds. So this is our counter. How it's going to work. So you can see now it's more dynamic. I'm not using a fixed value here, like a static value. It's going to be dynamic because it's going to change, going to be bumped up by 1000 every time the 1 second is added to our counter. And let's have a look. So you can see that it's going up. Yeah, 1000, 3, 4, and it's increasing. Immediately, once we detect that full second just went through, it will bump up the divider and wait for the next threshold to detect that there is a 1 second already passed, additional second. And this is how it works. So it's really straightforward with only 2 triggers. You can have a counter that works based on the built-in variable that can measure time, and it measures that in milliseconds. Why it's so good? Like why I like this technique more? Let me show you. So let's go back to our example here with timers. I'll just refresh that. So you remember the old one with the looping animation? Let's see the other one. So I'll go to the next timer, and you can see here what's going on. It's going up. You know the rules, how it was set up. But now if we go away from the screen and we'll return, you can see it's still increasing. So let's have a look one more time. It's 20. I'll go back here and move on. And with the old way, it would stay at 20. But now if we gonna go back, it's gonna be 29. So I spoke 9 seconds while being on this screen. So it's not stopping. It's not like there is no freeze when you move a focus away from the training, which is really, really good. So there is one solution that I can show you straight away. And let's go back to Storyline. And it's not only that you can show a numerical value that is increasing, you can also work with sliders just by changing where the value is incremented of 1. So here I've put a slider and you can see that there is a slider variable slider 1. And now with this, you can just put an images or whatever you want on the slider and it will automatically move on. I also tend to add a block like a transparent rectangle on top of the slider so user cannot interact with it. And if I just play it, you see that the mouse is moving on the slider. And let's say I have 60 seconds before the mouse will eat the cheese, and you can adjust it the way you want. So how it is done, let's go quickly to see the slider. So I got the slider and it says that the start is at 0, the end is at 60. So we are talking about 60-second timer. The step is by 1. And now here, instead of assigning it to a millisecond to seconds variable, I'm doing it still here at the bottom just for reference, but here you can see that I'm doing the same assignment of adding a value 1 to a slider. So the slider is like a variable that is managing the progress of values on this slider here. So this is how it might work and you can play with it the way you want. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you for your attention and see you next time.